My mother-in-law demanded I sign over my inheritance. Then she saw my real last name. Sign here, here, and here, my mother-in-law commanded, sliding a stack of legal documents across her mahogany desk. Or pack your things and get out of my son's life forever. I picked up the pen, then paused to read the signature line. When I wrote my full legal name, the one I'd kept hidden for 3 years, her lawyer dropped his coffee mug. It shattered on the marble floor, but nobody moved to clean it. That's impossible, Margaret whispered, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at my signature. You can't be Harrison Fitzgerald's daughter. I finished calmly. Yes, Margaret. I'm that Fitzgerald. And you just tried to steal from the wrong person. Let me back up 3 weeks, to when this whole mess started. My name is Sophia Fitzgerald Brennan, though for the past 3 years, I've just gone by Sophie Brennan. When I married James, I legally kept my maiden name but used his socially. It was easier than explaining why a Fitzgerald heiress was working as a pediatric nurse and living in a modest apartment. My father, Harrison Fitzgerald, built a real estate empire worth billions. When he died 2 years ago, he left me everything, not that anyone in my husband's family knew. I'd watched too many relationships crumble under the weight of money to advertise my inheritance. James knew, of course. We'd met at a charity hospital fundraiser where I was volunteering, not attending as a donor. He fell in love with Sophie the nurse, not Sophia the heiress. We had a small courthouse wedding because Margaret had declared she wouldn't waste money on her son marrying some nobody nurse. For 3 years, I'd endured Margaret's condescension. She never missed an opportunity to remind me how lucky I was to marry up into the Brennan family, who owned a successful chain of hardware stores worth maybe 10 million on a good day. James could have married Victoria Ashford, she'd say at every family dinner. Her father owns half of downtown. But instead, he chose you. I'd bite my tongue and pass the potatoes, knowing my trust fund could buy the Ashfords' entire portfolio with pocket change. Everything changed when my grandmother Evelyn passed away 3 weeks ago. She'd been my last living relative besides some distant cousins, and she left me her entire estate, another 50 million in assets and her historic mansion. I'd taken a week off work to handle the arrangements privately. James offered to come, but I told him I needed to process alone. That was my mistake. Margaret saw an opportunity. When I returned home, James was sitting on our couch with his head in his hands. Margaret stood behind him, her lips pursed in triumph. Sophie, James said quietly, Mom says you inherited some money. I looked at Margaret, who was practically vibrating with greed. How did you? I have friends at the probate court, she interrupted. Imagine my surprise when they mentioned the Fitzgerald estate was finally being settled. The nurse my son married is connected to real money. How fascinating. It's a modest inheritance from my grandmother, I said carefully. Margaret laughed, a sharp sound like breaking glass. Modest? $50 million? Don't insult my intelligence. And that's just from the grandmother. What about your father's estate? James looked up at me, confusion written across his face. Your father? You said he died when you were young and left nothing. I said he died 2 years ago and I didn't want to talk about it, I corrected. There's a difference. Don't deflect, Margaret snapped. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over your grandmother's inheritance to James. It's only fair, marital assets should be shared. We have a prenup, I reminded her. Inheritances are separate property. Her smile turned predatory. Yes, about that prenup. My lawyer has found some irregularities. It seems it might not be as ironclad as you thought. But I'm willing to make this simple. Sign over the inheritance voluntarily, or I'll make sure James divorces you and takes half of everything anyway. Mum, James protested. We agreed to talk to Sophie, not threaten her. Quiet, James, Margaret commanded. Someone needs to protect your interests since you clearly won't. I studied my husband's face. He looked miserable but hadn't shut his mother down completely. James, do you want my grandmother's money? He couldn't meet my eyes. It would help the family business. We're struggling, and Mom says. Mom says, I repeated. What do you say? I don't know, Sophie. 50 million is life-changing money. Maybe we should consider using my dead grandmother's legacy to prop up your mother's failing business. I felt something break inside me. You know what? Let's meet with your mother's lawyer. Margaret, set it up for tomorrow. Her eyes gleamed with victory. Finally, some sense. 2 o'clock at my attorney's office. Don't be late. That night, James tried to apologize. I don't want your money, Sophie. But Mom made some good points about marriage being a partnership. Did she? I asked, pulling out my laptop. Then why haven't I seen a penny from your family's business in 3 years? Why do I pay half our rent when you make twice my salary? That's different. No, James. It's not. I turned my screen toward him. Do you know what the Fitzgerald Group is? He shrugged. Some company. I pulled up the Forbes article from last year. The Fitzgerald Group. Founded by Harris and Fitzgerald. Real estate holdings in 12 countries. Estimated value, $3.8 billion. James went very still. That's your father. Was. He died 2 years ago. You're worth billions. His voice cracked. And you let my mother treat you like trash for 3 years. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I have, I said quietly. Clearly, that was too much to ask. The next day, I arrived at the law office wearing my usual scrubs. I'd come straight from work. Margaret sneered at my appearance. Couldn't even dress appropriately? Well, I suppose it doesn't matter. You won't need to work after this anyway. Her lawyer, Mr. Peterson, was a thin man with nervous hands. He'd already laid out the papers, a complete transfer of my grandmother's estate to James. This is fairly straightforward, he began. We'll need your signature on. Actually, I interrupted, pulling out my phone. My lawyer would like to video in. Is that acceptable? Margaret scoffed. Your lawyer? What? Some legal aid attorney? Not exactly. I connected the call, and a familiar face appeared on screen. Everyone, this is Robert Steinberg from Steinberg, Morris & Associates. Peterson dropped his pen. Steinberg's firm was legendary. They handled billionaire divorces and corporate takeovers, not small family disputes. Good afternoon, Steinberg said smoothly. I understand there's some confusion about my client's assets. Shall we clear that up? Margaret recovered first. This is ridiculous. We don't need. Actually, you do, I said, pulling out a folder. Mr. Peterson, you might want to review these documents. They are the actual prenuptial agreement James and I signed, not whatever version Margaret showed you. Peterson's hands shook as he read. This is authenticated by 3 separate law firms. The Fitzgerald family doesn't take chances with documentation, Steinberg said. Now, about this attempted coercion. It's not coercion. Margaret shrieked. She's been hiding assets from my son. She's a gold digger in reverse. Interesting theory, I said. Let's test it. James, here's what I actually inherited. I placed a thick portfolio on the table. Grandmother's $50 million. Father's $3.8 billion. The family trust fund, another $500 million. Various properties and investments, we'll round down to $4.5 billion total. James had gone pale. Margaret looked like she might faint. Now, I continued, let's discuss what you tried to steal from me. Not just the $50 million. That was just the beginning, wasn't it, Margaret? Your plan was to get me to sign one document, then discover more assets and demand those too. How dare you? I dare because I have recordings, I said, pulling out my phone. Legal in this state, by the way. Every conversation where you called me a gold digger, not good enough, a nobody nurse. And this lovely one from last night where you told James to, what was it? Milk her for everything before she realizes she can do better. I hit play. Margaret's voice filled the room, saying exactly that. That's taken out of context, she gasped. The context where you thought I was just middle class with a small inheritance. I asked, here's what's going to happen. James and I are getting divorced. The prenup stands. He gets nothing of mine. I get nothing of his. Clean break. Sophie, please, James started. I didn't know. That's the problem, James. You didn't know I was rich, so you let your mother treat me like garbage. You were ready to take my grandmother's money when you thought it was all I had. What would you have done if you'd known about the billions? Actually, don't answer. I don't want to know. I stood to leave, then turned back to Margaret. Oh, one more thing. That chain of hardware stores you're so proud of? I own the commercial properties you lease. All 23 locations. You have 90 days to find new locations or negotiate with my management company. I'd suggest being very, very nice to them. You bought our properties. Margaret whispered. 2 years ago, when you made James skip my birthday dinner for a business emergency that turned out to be your book club. I was feeling petty. I shrugged. Consider the below-market rent I've been charging you a 3-year gift. That ends now. I signed the divorce papers Peterson hastily drew up, then walked to the door. Mr. Steinberg will handle everything else. James, I'll have my things moved out by Friday. Sophie, wait. James called out. I love you. I turned one last time. No, James. You loved the idea of a sweet, grateful wife who would never challenge your mother. The real me? The one with a backbone and a bank account. You were ready to rob her blind. As I left, I heard Margaret screaming at Peterson about finding loopholes, then at James about letting me go. But it was too late. They'd shown me who they really were, and I finally believed them. The divorce was finalized in record time. James got nothing except the lesson that his mother's greed had cost him everything. Margaret's business folded within 6 months. Turns out, when you can't bully your landlord and your reputation is destroyed, hardware stores don't do well. I kept working as a pediatric nurse because I loved it, but I moved to a better hospital where I could implement programs I'd only dreamed about before. I funded a new children's wing with part of my grandmother's money. It seemed fitting. 6 months later, I ran into Victoria Ashford at a charity gala, the same one where I'd met James years ago. She laughed when she heard about Margaret's downfall. She always said James should have married me instead of you, Victoria said, sipping champagne. Joke's on her. My father's business is worth maybe 30 million. You could buy and sell us 10 times over. Money isn't everything, I said, meaning it. No, Victoria agreed. But respect is. And anyone who only respects money doesn't deserve either. Looking back, I'm grateful for Margaret's greed. It showed me that I'd rather be alone with my dignity intact than with someone who only valued what I could give them. The Fitzgerald name opened doors, but it was my choice to walk through them alone rather than with people who would have pushed me through for their own gain.